Have you ever really thought of a medical chart as, like, a crime scene? It's filled with clues, some red herrings, and a central mystery that needs solving. And the medical coder? Well, that's the detective, the one who has to sift through all the evidence to piece together the true story of what's happening with the patient. So today, we're putting on our detective hats and diving into one of the most complex case files around, infectious diseases. So here's our game plan. We'll start with our very first case, get the fundamental rules down, then crack the complex case of sepsis. After that, we've got special investigations into HIV and COVID-19. We'll solve the all-important sequencing puzzle, and finally, we'll see why all this detective work matters so much. All right, let's jump right in. Our main case file today is Chapter 1 of the ICD-10-CM Codebook. This whole chapter is dedicated to certain infectious and parasitic diseases. You can think of it as our official guide, our rulebook, really the source of all our best clues. So when we look at this chart, what are we really looking for? I mean, it's so much more than just a diagnosis. A patient's chart hides a whole narrative. It tells a story of an illness, where it started, how it progressed, and how it's affecting the entire body. Our job is to translate that story into the universal language of codes. And the first step is knowing exactly what questions to ask. Every good detective needs a toolkit, right? And for a coder, that means getting a handle on the fundamental rules. Before we can even think about solving the big, complex cases, we have got to master the basics. These rules are what help us tell the difference between clues that sound alike and zero in on the real culprit. Okay, our first term is bacteremia. Think of this as finding a fingerprint at the scene. It's solid evidence that a suspect, in this case bacteria, was present. It literally just means bacteria are in the bloodstream. Now, that doesn't automatically mean the patient is sick from it, but it is a critical first clue. Now, let's compare that to septicemia. This isn't just a fingerprint. This is the culprit caught red-handed. Septicemia is a systemic disease. The body is having a major reaction to the bacteria or their toxins. We're talking about a full-blown infection raging through the bloodstream, and believe me, it's a much more serious situation. So let's be crystal clear on the difference here, because it's a big one. Bacteremia is simply the presence of bacteria. That's it. Septicemia is the body's systemic, poisonous reaction to it. Mistaking one for the other, that's like confusing a person of interest with a convicted felon. For a coder, getting this distinction right is absolutely vital. So this brings us to a huge, central question. When you're looking at a diagnosis, what's the lead? Is the story really about the specific bug, like Staphylococcus aureus, or is it about where the infection is, like pneumonia in the lungs? The answer to this one question basically determines your entire path of investigation and leads you straight to the correct code. All right, with our toolkit ready to go, let's tackle our first major case, sepsis. This is, without a doubt, one of the most challenging and high-stakes diagnoses a coder will ever face. It's complex, it's dangerous, and the coding for it has to be perfect. No room for error. So first off, what is sepsis exactly? Well, the official definition is a systemic inflammatory response syndrome. We call it SARS, that's specifically caused by an infection. You see, SARS is the body's huge, overwhelming inflammatory reaction, but other things like trauma can cause it. Sepsis is what we call it when we can confirm an infection is the trigger for that whole firestorm. Let's look at a real-world example. The diagnosis here is sepsis due to MRSA. Our investigation leads us to code A41.02, and this one code is just brilliant because it captures both the condition, sepsis, and the specific bug causing it, MRSA. It's what we call a combination code. It tells the entire story in one tidy little entry. But what happens when sepsis turns severe? Well, the story gets more complicated, and so does the coding. It actually becomes a three-step process. First, you code the underlying infection. That's our culprit. Second, you add the code for severe sepsis, our 65.2. And third, you add more codes for any organ dysfunction, which are the consequences of the illness. It paints a full picture, the cause, the condition, and the complication. Okay, let's move on to some special cases that require a unique touch. HIV and COVID-19. I mean, these are two of the most significant infectious diseases of our time, and they come with their own very strict rules of engagement for coders. You have to be exceptionally precise with these.
This right here, this is the single most important rule for both of these investigations. You only, and I mean only, code what is confirmed by the provider. Words like suspected, possible, or likely, that's just speculation. In the world of coding, we need hard evidence. A definitive diagnostic statement is completely non-negotiable.
And this rule is universal. Just look at this comparison. On one side, you've got the rules for HIV. On the other, the rules for COVID-19. The wording is almost identical. It just doesn't matter what the disease is. The principle of confirmation required is the absolute bedrock of accurate coding. No confirmation, no code. Simple as that. And you know, the investigation doesn't just stop when the initial infection is over. As our medical understanding evolves, so do the codes. The emergence of what we call long COVID led to the creation of a brand new specific code, U09.9. This is huge because it allows researchers and public health officials to track the long-term story of the pandemic's impact on people's health. So, we've found all the right codes, but our detective work isn't done yet, not even close. Now we have to solve this sequencing puzzle. The order in which you list the codes is just as important as the codes themselves. It's the difference between telling a clear, coherent story and just having a jumbled mess of facts. And here it is, the golden rule of sequencing for our infectious disease case file. Codes from Chapter 1, that's our infectious disease chapter, they take precedence. If an infection is the #1 reason for the medical encounter, its code has got to come first. It's the lead character in our story, period.
So why all the fuss about the order? Well, because that first code you list, the principal diagnosis, it answers the most important question of all. Why is the patient here right now? It sets the entire context for the hospital stay. It drives everything from the treatment plan to how the hospital gets reimbursed. It's the headline of the story.
This is a perfect example using HIV. Check this out. Case 1. A patient is admitted for a condition caused by HIV. The story is about HIV, so the HIV code, B20, gets sequenced first. Now look at case 2. The same patient is admitted, but this time for a broken arm. The story isn't about HIV anymore, it's about the broken arm. So the fracture code is sequenced first, you see? The sequence totally defines the plot.
We've cracked the cases. We've solved the puzzles. Now it's time for the final and most important question. Why does any of this really matter? Because the work of a coding detective doesn't just live in a chart. It has profound, real-world consequences. Your detective work literally shapes reality. I'm not kidding. Accurate codes ensure proper patient care and safety. They determine if hospitals get fair financial reimbursements. They provide the critical data we need to track pandemics and figure out where to send resources. And they form the bedrock of the medical research that's going to lead to the cures of tomorrow. It really all boils down to this: the careful, meticulous investigation of one single patient's story by one dedicated coder can create a ripple effect that touches countless lives, from the patient in that hospital bed to the future of global health. The responsibility is just immense. So, always remember this: a patient's chart isn't just a pile of data, it's a biography. And a code isn't just a number, it's a word, a sentence, a chapter in that person's life. Every single code tells a story. The coder's job is to make sure it's the right one.